Okay, Virgo. Anna here from your channel, Virgo. So, no easing in today. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Like and subscribe if you're ready for this. Let's go, Virgo. You already know. That's the first truth, and it's the one nobody says. You already know something is wrong with this situation. You have known for a while. Not in the way of having assembled sufficient evidence to make a formal case, not with the kind of knowing that satisfies the part of you that requires proof before it will act, but in the older way, the body way, the way you know when the temperature of a room changes before you can see why, the way you know when someone's voice is slightly off and you can't point to which word gave it away. You have been knowing this and you have been doing something that people do when they know things they are not ready to act on. You have been being very busy, very focused on the surface of things, very engaged with the details that keep the larger question from having to be asked. This ends today, not because I'm telling you to end it, because you are tired of the busyness, because the knowing has gotten loud enough that the busyness isn't covering it anymore, because you are here watching this, which means some part of you decided it was time. So, the truth. This situation has been costing you something you have not been naming. Not money, not time, though both of those too. Something less visible and more expensive, the specific daily compounding cost of maintaining a version of events that you do not entirely believe, of being the person in this situation who keeps things together, who stays reasonable, who does not make it worse, who absorbs the weight of what is unresolved and distributes it through the ordinary functioning of their days rather than setting it down and demanding that the source of the weight be addressed. You have been absorbing. You have been so good at absorbing that the people around you may not fully understand how much there has been to absorb, may have come to rely on your absorbing capacity in a way that has quietly over time allowed more to be placed on you than was ever agreed to, than was ever acknowledged, than you ever consciously signed up for. The situation produced an arrangement. The arrangement is not equitable, and the inequity has been running long enough that it has become normalized, not just for them, but in some corner of you that has confused absorbing with handling, and handling with strength, and strength with the willingness to continue indefinitely. Strength is not indefinite absorption. That is the first truth, not dramatic, not the revelation of some hidden conspiracy. Just you have been absorbing more than your share of what this situation produces, and the absorbing has a cost, and the cost has been accumulating without being acknowledged, and it is time for that to change. Not through explosion, not through the kind of confrontation that feels satisfying for approximately 45 minutes and then produces its own aftermath that requires more absorbing, but through the clear eyed, non negotiable, I am no longer pretending this is fine acknowledgement to yourself first before anyone else that this is not fine. The second truth is about the other person in this. They know too. Not everything, possibly not the extent of what the absorbing has cost you, possibly not the full degree to which the arrangement has been inequitable, possibly not the specific, detailed cumulative weight of what they have been placing on you. But they know something, they know on some level that the current arrangement suits them more than it suits you. They know on some level that you have been accommodating in ways that go beyond what the situation actually requires. They know on some level that there is a conversation that has not been had, that has been circled around, that has been approached and then retreated from, that exists as an understood but unspoken subject beneath the surface of every interaction that seems to be about something else. And they have been letting the not having it continue. This is not necessarily malice. People let uncomfortable conversations not happen for a huge variety of reasons that have nothing to do with wanting to harm the person they are not having them with. Fear, avoidance, the comfortable inertia of an arrangement that is working adequately from where they are sitting. The specific, not always conscious calculation that the status quo, however imperfect, is preferable to the disruption of addressing what the status quo is actually built on. They may genuinely care about you, they may genuinely not want to hurt you, and they are also simultaneously allowing a situation to continue that is not serving you, which means their care and their allowing are coexisting. And the coexistence of those two things is its own kind of truth worth seeing clearly. Care that does not act on its own behalf is not fully care. It is care performing adequately within the limits of its own comfort. What the situation actually is, not what it was presented as, not what the early version of it looked like when it had not yet fully revealed its shape, not the version that made sense when you entered it and that you have been trying to preserve the logic of, even as the thing itself has drifted significantly from that original logic. What it actually is now in this form at this point in its development, after everything that has happened and not happened, and been said and not said, a holding pattern that is the most accurate description of what this situation has become. Not movement, not development, not the progression of something toward a destination that both parties are invested in reaching. A holding pattern, the aeronautical term for an aircraft that is in the air, burning fuel, going around and around a point it has not yet been cleared to approach. The holding pattern is not a problem in the short term. It is the appropriate response to conditions that make landing impossible right now. But a holding pattern that continues indefinitely is not a holding pattern anymore. It is a decision not to land. It is the consumption of resources, fuel, time, the structural integrity of the aircraft in service of an extended suspension that never resolves into the thing it was supposed to be suspended in preparation for. You have been in this holding pattern for long enough is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than. The fuel is not infinite. The structural integrity of your patience and your absorbing and your willingness to continue circling has been tested longer than it was designed to be tested. And the conditions on the ground, the conditions that were supposed to change, that you were told would change, that you have been waiting in the holding pattern for, have not changed in the ways that would justify continued suspension. The question is not whether to keep circling. The question is where to land. And that question requires you to know clearly without the softening that hope applies to hard information, what the actual options are, what the actual ground looks like from here. What is genuinely possible from this position versus what you have been holding as possible? Because the alternative to holding it as possible is sitting with something you have not been ready to sit with. The thing you have not been ready to sit with, say it to yourself right now. Not out loud internally in the private, honest, no one is watching version of your own understanding of this situation. The thing that the busyness has been covering, the thing the absorbing has been arranged around, the knowing that was always there beneath the maintenance of the official version of events. That thing. Whatever it is for you, because I cannot name it as precisely as you can, because the specifics of this situation live in you and not in me, because the truth of it is yours and the naming of it belongs to the private space where you actually know things, rather than to any external reading of any kind. Whatever the specific content of the thing, you have not been ready to sit with. The time for the not sitting has passed. Not because sitting with it will be comfortable, it will not be. Not because sitting with it will immediately produce a clear course of action, it may not. But because the not sitting has been costing you the absorbing cost, the holding pattern cost, the indefinite suspension of your own clarity cost, and those costs are real even when invisible, and they do not stop accumulating simply because you are looking away from their source. Sit with it for however long it takes to move from the first response, which will be uncomfortable, which will be the specific discomfort of seeing something you have been not seeing, into the second response, which is the response of someone who has seen what they needed to see and now has the actual information required to make an actual decision, rather than continuing to circle the point indefinitely without landing. What truth costs? The reason people avoid it is not stupidity and it is not weakness. It is accurate accounting. Truth in a complicated situation involving people you care about or have cared about costs the current version of things. It ends the holding pattern, which means it ends the not knowing, which means it requires you to actually know something and then actually respond to knowing it. And knowing and responding are harder than not knowing and circling. They produce real consequences. They change things irreversibly. They cannot be unhappened once they happen. The truth lands and the ground is different after. This is a real cost, not an imaginary one deployed by the avoidance part of you to prevent the clarity part of you from acting. A real cost. Something is lost when a situation that was being maintained by mutual agreement to not quite see it clearly is finally seen clearly. The version of the thing that the not seeing was preserving the version with more possibility in it, more room for things to resolve into the form you originally wanted them to resolve into. That version does not survive clear sight. Clear sight sees what is actually there, and what is actually there is sometimes more than what was hoped for, and sometimes it is less. If it is less, if the clear sight reveals that what has been maintained through a significant amount of your absorbing and accommodating and circling patience is genuinely less than what you have been holding space for it to become, then the cost of the truth is the grief of that. The actual, real takes the time it takes grief of a gap between what was hoped and what is. That grief is not pleasant. It is not quick. It is also not infinite, and it is incomparably preferable to the indefinite, slow cost of the holding pattern, which takes longer and costs more and produces, at the end of it, nothing different from what the grief would have produced, except in a more depleted version of you. What happens after, not the neat resolution, not the version where the clear sight produces the obvious action and the obvious action produces the expected outcome, and the expected outcome resolves everything into a form that makes the whole difficult stretch retrospectively coherent and worth it. That version exists sometimes, not always. The truth produces clarity. Clarity produces options. Options require choices. Choices produce consequences. Consequences require navigation. None of that is clean. All of it is more navigable than the holding pattern because at minimum it is moving. Because at minimum the fuel that was being burned in suspension is now being used for actual propulsion in an actual direction. Because whatever the ground turns out to look like when the landing finally happens, ground is better than circling. Ground can be stood on, ground can be built from. Ground does not require the constant maintenance of altitude that the holding pattern requires. Get to the ground. However the landing looks, however different it is from the landing you originally planned for when you entered the flight path, the ground is where things happen. The ground is where the actual version of your life is waiting, not the suspended version, not the circling version, not the version maintained by absorbing and accommodating and the daily expensive work of pretending the holding pattern is temporary when you have known for a while now that it is not the actual version on the actual ground. It is time. You already know this. You knew it before you watched this. You will know it more clearly after. That is the only thing this reading does not tell you something you don't have access to, but create the specific designated space in which what you already know is allowed to be what it is, without the busyness covering it, without the absorbing, diffusing it, without the holding pattern, rhythm of circling the same point over and over in the same direction at the same altitude, making the same observations and arriving back at the same position, providing the comfortable illusion that movement is happening. The illusion has served its purpose. It kept you safe while you gathered the resources for what comes next. It gave you the time you needed to become the version of yourself that can handle the landing, that can sit with the thing you have not been sitting with, that can hear the truth without the truth destroying anything essential, because the essential things in you are not located in the maintained version of this situation. They were never located there. They live in you. They have been there through the whole holding pattern. They will be there after the landing. You are not at risk from your own clarity. You never were. Land